Oh well, we should probably do. Well, okay, so I'll just do a little intro and then I'll go over it. So
Okay.
my name is Alex. I work with Two Scoop Games. It's a small studio here in Louisville. It's just me and another guy.
So we're not for profit, and our goal is to expand game development and creation in the city of Louisville, whether you're an artist, programmer, musician, marketer, anyone and everyone can be involved in games in that pursuit. So we do that through our kids' education events. We host classes and workshops for kids. We do community meetups like art night, and we have industry speaker nights, and we do bring in special guests to come in and talk about their game creating process. We have game jams, and a game jam is like where you try to make a game within a specific amount of time, whether it's 48 hours or a month. We're just now wrapping up from Kentucky Fried Pixels game jam, which is a month-long jam where you contribute games and hopes to sell those games off. And then we have gallery and playtest nights to come out and playtest our games and see some of the cool artwork that you see in the lobby out there. So here's some of the games that have been submitted so far in Kentucky Fried Pixels. So you buy a bundle of the games for pay what you want kind of amount, whether it's $1 or $50. It all goes back to the game creators and the studios. Alex Bezuska, and like you said before, he works with Two Scoop Games. He's the president of Louisville Make Games and all of that good stuff. So I'll let him speak about using Photoshop to create graphics into the
So hey everyone, who in the room has made has done pixel art before? So a few people. Cool. Okay. So there's some like specific stuff that goes into making pixel art. Like if you've seen, everybody know what pixel art is? Like you kind of okay. So it's a good primer here. So a lot of like old school games back in the day with they had strict limitations on what the hardware could actually do. And so there were color limitations, and there were also limitations of like how many pixels you could actually put on a screen. So, for example, like the original Nintendo, it was only about like 200 and something pixels. It was very small compared to like today. If you have like a 1080p TV, that's 1920 by 1080. That's a lot of pixels, and even more if you have like a 4K or something like that. And a lot of monitors and laptops and stuff are big like that too. But because of that limitation, they had to create these little characters that were sometimes like between 32 and 64 pixels tall, like these tiny little like icons for characters, and they had to try to get as much detail as they could into that. And they had to use like a really small color palette. For example, like with this, this is somebody has recreated a sprite from one of the original Mega Man games. And so when people talk about sprites, a sprite is just like a single picture in the game. And so, let's see if this isn't loading. We've had some internet issues lately that are really frustrating. Well, okay, so let's do this. It might just be that site. It is just that site. Okay. So, for example, here's a screenshot from one of the original Mega Man games. You notice that it's like extremely small. And if we take that, anyway, so you'll see it's made up of a bunch of pixels. The character itself is made up of a bunch of pixels, and this kind of graphical style, it wasn't really a style at the time. It was just like what the hardware limitations had for the game. Like you could only make stuff like this. You could only make stuff with a certain color palette, and you can only a certain size. But over the years, the hardware's increased in power, and people could do all kinds of better stuff. They could do 3D stuff. They could do more advanced 2D stuff. Like you could pretty much like take a digital painting and put it straight into a game now, and the game will just run just fine. You can like make it as detailed as you want, and it'll be fine. But with as far as 2D goes, so you can do all kinds of crazy hand-drawn styles. Like, has anybody heard of the game Cuphead? So, Cuphead's a really interesting game because they've got an art style that looks like the old Disney style. Yeah, let me show you. I don't have the sound on, but it might work. So this is all the stuff that let me show you here. So for example here, like all this stuff, this is all in-game. This is like happening while the person is playing the game, and it just looks like a cartoon. It just looks seamless and perfect. And that's only possible on newer game systems, newer computers, and stuff like that. Like you wouldn't be able to do that in the 80s when the Nintendo came out. So that pixel style, that like art style where you have a character that's something like this, where it's like there's like a grid of pixels. You got 32 by 32 to work with. Stuff like that is become an art style. It's a choice instead of it being a necessity. So now there are engines. A game engine is like a piece of software that you use to make a game. So now there are engines like Pico 8, which is a example of an engine that has those limitations, where your art has to look something like this. You could see like the really small, like little postage stamp sized games that you can make with it, but that kind of limitation brings out a lot of creativity and lets people kind of find interesting ways to work with that and make cool stuff that you think is kind of like pushing the limit of what this can do. And so this has a limitation of pretty similar to the original Nintendo from the 80s, and people love making stuff with it. This is brand new. Like this is stuff that people are working on right now, and these games look like old Nintendo games because it's become a choice. It's become like this limitation or a style. And so I grew up with the Super Nintendo, and the Super Nintendo had about twice as powerful of a processor than the original Nintendo. The graphics, you had lots and lots more colors, and the art ended up looking, similar, but it was a huge step forward. And so, working on a game right now called Kickbot DX, and it's basically the art style is supposed to be sort of around the time of like the Super Nintendo. So I've got some screenshots here. It's a little hard to see, but I'll show the game, and you can kind of get an idea. So it's more of like I was saying, it's more of a style choice than a limitation, because phones can do all kinds of stuff. They could do complete 3D games. You could do, you could have whatever kind of art style you want. So this is the game I'm working on, Kickbot DX. It's going to come out for iOS and Android a little later this year, and all of the art in the game is pixel art. I try to keep it around the look of like Super Nintendo, or maybe a little bit higher res, but most of it's about that. And you can see that we got like big chunky pixels for everything. You can especially see it in the logo, because the logo is a little bit like zoomed in. And so with this art style, there are some things that you have to watch out for when you're working in Photoshop, and there's some things that There are some specific tools for working with pixel art also, but I'll just show you a little bit of like what the game's like. So it's like it's a endless test chamber where you're going through and you're trying to avoid these obstacles, and every time you lose, it's another robot has to be created to run through the obstacle course. This is a sequel to a game that we made about 4 years ago. The big difference is that you can customize the robot. So I'm going to show you some of the part customization stuff. You can customize the head. You can customize bodies, legs, and arms. And then once you've got a robot that you like the look of, you can play a game as that character. And we're going to have a shop where you can buy parts and you can unlock them through playing the game and gathering points in the game. You can compare your scores with friends. There's a leaderboard and stuff like that. So for this, I've created a lot of different characters. Each of the characters, we have like these interchangeable parts. And the way that the animation works, where it, don't pay attention to that drop shadow under the character. That's not supposed to do that. That looks ridiculous. But the animation for most of these parts, you can see like the arms that are waving. The arm there is waving and the character's moving up and down. I did that stuff with Unity, but there are some examples of Spritesheet animations in the game. It's a little hard to see right now, but there are these research points that you collect. You can see them. I just gathered 2 of them on the side there. They have an animation where there's like a shine effect that goes across them, just to kind of like shimmer so you notice them. And that's done with a Spritesheet. And I'm going to show you also the little thumbs that are tapping on the screen there. That's done with a Spritesheet, and that's just a simple like 2-frame thing. So I'm going to show you how to do something like that. The logo at the top here, one of the things I have to get done for my game anyway is we're going to do some stuff to animate the logo. And we want the logo when you first come into the game for it to shine, so similar to how the research points shine. And so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to show you how Spritesheets work along the way. So like I was saying before, a sprite is like any one picture in your game. So like a character could be a sprite, a tile that goes into making the background can be a sprite. It's just one picture. That's basically the way I think of it. And so a Spritesheet is a collection of pictures, and usually people group them into Spritesheets because it makes it easier for the game engine to take all of those. It's not taking up as much space, and the game engine can take the Spritesheet and cut it up into all the pictures that are needed to make the game. And a lot of times the engine handles that for you, and you don't really have to do that much. With Unity, it has some really great tools for showing the edges of the sprites, and you can kind of customize the boxes around them to cut things out just right. And it actually does a lot of that for you. So I'm going to show a example of a Spritesheet here. Let's see if we can find something good. So this looks like something good. This is from Kirby, I guess, or actually this looks like it was some fan art, but it's pretty similar. So for example, the top one there, that's just like a blink, it looks like, and then this one here, this is a walking animation. So each frame is like a film strip. It's like if you're doing cartooning, or if you're doing frame by frame animation where you like where you're taking a picture of your drawing each frame and changing the frame. So this lines up, and there's a grid of these, and they're equally spaced apart so that you can cut them up and actually make this into an animation. So here we've got let's see, here's an animation where the character's like spinning around, running on a star. There's just some different ones. Some of them are only like 2 frames, and some of them, like this walking animation, it looks like there's 4, 5, 6, 10 frames. So the more frames you have in your animation, it's going to look smoother because of all the things that are in between all of the major actions that the character's taking. So here's like a Mario one. So there's 2 different things that have to do with animation. There's their frames, obviously. Each of these sprites in the Spritesheet is 1 frame of animation. That you can change how long those frames take, and there's a term in animation called keyframes. So a keyframe is like an action that like the starting point might be a keyframe and the ending point might be a keyframe, or you might have something that just seamlessly loops around, and so don't really need to worry about that. It's mostly just about the individual frames. So what I'm going to show you first off is some stuff in Photoshop that you need to watch out for when doing sprites for if you want the pixel look, because there are a lot of tools in Photoshop that are made to smooth things over and kind of make things look nice and smooth and have crisp and have soft edges, and you want to turn all that stuff off. So I'm going to make a new file. Who's familiar with working with Photoshop? Like, who's working with Photoshop? Okay, good. A lot of people. Good. You know, sometimes, even though it's an expensive tool, a lot of people use it. So when you're starting out with Photoshop, you can choose your color mode here. If you're doing anything in graphic design or anything that's going to be on the computer that's not for print, use RGB color. And then I'm just going to make a really small sample animation. So let's do like 32 by 32 pixels. And I'm just going to leave the resolution at 72 dpi or pixels per inch. And I'm going to leave I'm going to see if I can, no, I'll leave the background white because I'm going to delete the background anyway. And I'll create that. So I'm just zooming in so I can see this. If you get close enough, it's a little hard to see. Let me just fill this with paint or something here. Can you see the lines in between? It's like a big grid. So when you get close enough, I think that it is, I don't know the exact time that it does it, but it looks like if you go past 500% maybe, when you get really zoomed in, you can start to see the lines in between the pixels. And so those are all individual pixels. I'm going to show you a couple of interesting things here. So let me just make this background gray. One of the first things is anti-aliasing. So what anti-aliasing does is it tries to make things look smooth. It tries to make the edges of some of the things look smooth and soft. And so what it does is it adds in extra pixels. It adds in extra information to try to make that look that way. And so I've got the circle tool, circle selection tool, and I've got anti-alias turned on. So I'm going to drag this out and make a circle. And you can see that because I'm zoomed in really far, you can see that it's like this pixel edge, and it's like this hard pixel edge. So I'm going to pick a different color that contrasts on this and make a new layer. And now when I paint on this, you can see that with anti-aliasing turned on, it's adding in colors that I didn't want. And well, for this particular case, like you might want this if you're trying to make something that looks perfectly smooth, but if you want something that looks like it has that hard pixel edge on it, then this is kind of ruining your style. So you can see it even made pixels that are outside of the selection, and that's all the computer is trying to find a way to make this look nice and smooth and round because it's a circle tool. So it's trying to help you out. So what you can do is, let me go back. If you turn, when you make the selection. So let me just cancel this. Do Command D to cancel that. So when I've got the circle selection tool here, I uncheck anti-alias, and then I'm going to drag out a circle again. And then when I hit paint, it's just doing the pixels that are inside of the selection, and it's nice. It's got this nice hard edge, so it looks like pixel art. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like a bouncing ball animation. So I'll start off, I'm going to do like a black outline on the ball, and then I'm going to do the inside of a color. So the other thing is that almost all of the tools in Photoshop have anti-aliasing settings, and if you're doing pixel art, you just need to turn that off on everything. So for example, the paint bucket also has anti-alias. So if let me go back to before I painted on this, and I'm going to bring up this paint color again. If I turn on anti-alias on the paint bucket, see, anti-alias wasn't on when I did the selection, but it's really just good to turn it off everywhere. And there's a couple other places that it's going to be, but I'll show you those later. So,
is there a global command that is preferences for that?
I haven't found one, no. I think each tool has it separately. There might be, but usually I turn it off. And sometimes I need to turn it on, like if I'm working on a different thing, and it's not, the settings aren't like per document, it's like saved for the tool for Photoshop. So if I start working on something else, sometimes I'll forget and I have to you know, I've had all my settings for pixel art turned on and I have to go and change that. So let's talk about one other thing that's like probably the most important thing with pixel art is the mode that you use if you want to scale things, or also this is going to come up in Unity too. So say I have this circle and I want to make it bigger or smaller. You usually don't want to make things bigger because you'll lose the detail and it's going to try to figure out how to make something look like that, but maybe you want to make it smaller. So if I have, normally in Photoshop, I think it might be bilinear. Yep.
Sorry, the top bar is cut off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
That's weird. Okay, cool. I wonder why it's doing that. So you couldn't see when I was turning the anti-aliasing off.
No.
Okay. So let me go back real quick. So with the paint bucket, there's an anti-alias setting right here. And then also with the circle select, there's with the, I don't know the actual name of it, it's probably ellipse, but the anti-aliasing checkbox right here, you want to make sure that's off for everything. So if you want to resize something, like say this circle, I want to make it a little bit smaller. I don't really, but I'm just going to do it for an example. If I go to scale this, the interpolation is the mode that's right here. So basically what this does is it takes whatever data is there in the picture, whatever pixels are there, and it tries to figure out how to add more pixels to it to make it bigger, or what it would be like if it was smaller. So it's basically trying to do some math to figure that out. Anyway, if you have bilinear turned on, which is like the default, and you scale this down, then when you hit that, see how it added that anti-alias edge around it? So you've got, your things keep getting ruined. It keeps wanting to ruin your art for you. But if you turn on this setting, and this is like the most important thing, change this to nearest neighbor. In Photoshop, it's called nearest neighbor, and in Unity it's going to be called point filtering. That's the setting that means preserve those hard edges and keep it looking like pixel art. So I'm going to scale this down, and then it figures out where to put the pixels, but it's not going to put any like halftones or transparent pixels around the edge. So go back here. So the next tool that I'm going to use is the pencil. And so the pencil is normally, the brush tool is the one that's default here, but if you go inside of the brush, you can change it to pencil. And then by default, this is going to have a size on it. You want to change that size to 1. I mean, if you want to paint with more than 1 pixel at a time, you can, but this is like the setting that I normally have it on for doing pixel art. And yeah, so now I'm going to do, I'm going to fill in the circle. See what color should we do? I'll do green. So I'm going to pick a darker green here. And then when you're drawing around this edge, if you're trying to leave the black outline, what I like to do is I try to have like a 1 pixel outline. If I'm trying to have a 1 pixel outline, you don't want to have any doubles. And so a double is like, so say I'm just going to do this really rough, so, to start out. And then I can fill in this middle part here. So I deleted some of the black. So I'm going to go back here. Yeah. Okay, so a double is like, for example, right here, we've got like 2 pixels on this wall of this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that. But you see how this kind of comes in like an edge. It looks a lot better if you try to remove that. So this side over here has no doubles, and this side over here has doubles right here. So if you get rid of those, it makes it look more wound. There's a couple different ways of doing the outlines. Like a lot of times you'll make something and then put an outline around it after, but this is fine. So, and then I'm going to try to make the ball look like it's has some shading on it, so I'm going to make another circle here. Do a lighter color. And then I'll probably probably do like one more for a highlight. I'm just gonna go fully white with a highlight there. So I don't really like this dark color here. I'm gonna change that a little bit. So the other thing is with the paint bucket, there's a tolerance up here. Normally, I think that's set to 32, if you've got colors that are really similar, basically what this means is that if you have the tolerance set to 32, if you have the tolerance set high, it's probably going to paint more of the similar colors, so it'll fill that in. If you have it set to 1, it's only going to do colors that are exactly the same. So I'm trying to get this color to look right. I think that's okay. Okay. So from here, I've got this ball and I've got this background, and when you're bringing pixel art into, or any kind of artwork into games, you're probably going to use PNG as the format to export it as. It's the one that retains all of the data in the image and makes it look nice and crisp. GIF is the other one that can have a transparent background, but GIF doesn't really have that great of compression, so it usually looks pretty bad. But with PNG, it's always going to look nice, and you can have transparency. And so I'm going to get rid of this background, and so now I've got this ball and the transparent background. And also what I can do is under image, which you can't see because the top of the screen is getting cut off, you can do trim, and then what that's going to bring up is this menu here where you can do, you can tell it to trim off the transparent pixels. So it's basically going to crop it for you. It's going to crop it down to just the picture. And then I'm going to go to export, and there are some new export settings and I haven't really learned them yet, so I always use Save for Web. The options that come up for that, it's extremely small. But it looks like it was actually 22 and 22 where was the actual size of the ball. And I'm going to save this. I'm going to put it into my game because I'm currently working on this game and I have it open right now. So actually, I'm going to show you a couple things in Unity first. So let's stop there. So I'm going to open up Unity. So I'm going to see, can everybody see the top of the bar? Does that work? Yeah, okay. So this is my game that I'm working on, and this is like the default layout for Unity, is this layout where it's a lot like Adobe programs where you have like these different bars on the sides that have different menus and you can kind of move things around and all that. If anybody hasn't heard of Unity before, it's a game engine that's free to use. You can make games and export them for any kind of platform. I'm just going to leave it at that. There's some limitations, but there's not that many. It's pretty great. And so you can also create 2D games or 3D games. So I'm just going to open a new game. So go new project. When you open a new project, it's going to have two options. There's 2D or 3D. This is trying to connect to my account. Okay, so I'm going to change the template to 2D. I'm going to save it. I'm just going to say Art Night. Create project. I have a slow laptop. So a lot of artists are afraid of using Unity at first, or any game engine at first, because it's like, you think that, okay, it's making games, it's a lot of programming is involved and stuff. But the nice thing about Unity is it was really developed with the UI in mind. So everything about it is really like drag and drop friendly. You have a lot of different menus and a lot of settings they're pretty easy to figure out. So like when you start a new project, this is what it's going to look like. This section over here, this is the hierarchy. This is like all the things that are in your scene. And then over here, this is what the game will look like. But if you switch this menu up here to scene, this is what your scene looks like. It's just like an empty, basically like a blank canvas. And then there's the inspector over here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new sprite, and I can bring that picture that I made in there. So if you right-click over in the hierarchy and you go to 2D object sprite. So now you can see that there's this object right here. It's kind of invisible because we don't have any sprite on it yet, but it's got a sprite renderer. That's the object that actually, that's the component that actually makes the sprite. And then we have our picture that we saved. So I'm gonna go ahead and find that real quick. I'm going to save this. I'm going to go into this Art Night folder that I made. Save that. There weren't really any special settings I had to do. I've just saved it as a PNG. That's basically the only thing. So now I've got this, this ball is in the folder. I'm just going to take this and I'm going to drag it into this assets section down here at the bottom in project. So just drag it in there. So now this is imported into our Unity project, and you don't really have to do that much else. You just basically get your files into Unity. There's a folder called Assets by default. I like to make a folder called Sprites, so you can just right-click on here and go to Create Folder. I'm going to name it Sprites, and then I'm going to drag the ball into there. And now when I open up Sprites, oops, I dragged it into scene. Sprites. So now, if you click on this, you click on our sprite here. I'm just going to name this this game object ball, and then I'm going to take this sprite right here, and I'm going to drag that into this section right here that says sprite. And then you can see that I'm zooming in with the mouse wheel here, so you can see this sprite is really small because it's only 32 by 32, but you see that it's blurry. And so it doesn't look like how we created it. So if you go to ball, and this is the actual sprite image, over here in the inspector, there are a bunch of settings. The main one that we have to worry about is this filter mode here. And we want to change this to point, and then hit apply. And that's like pretty much the one thing that you have to remember if you're bringing pixel art into Unity is that point is the same thing as nearest neighbor in Photoshop. And so now we've got this ball, and it's showing up the correct way in the game. But it's just a single picture. There's no animation whatsoever. So let's go ahead and go back to Photoshop, and we can create some animation and create a sprite sheet. So from here, if I were doing this, what I would do is make some layers. So I take this original sprite, and I'm going to make a next layer. Take this, and I'm going to transform it. I'm going to make it. We need to have a little more like canvas size here. So I'm going to go to canvas size. Let's say that I want the whole animation to be like 128 by 128, so we have some room for the ball to bounce around. So this. So I'm going to name this first one here frame 1. Frame 1, and then we'll name this one. Let's do like maybe 10 frames or so. So I'll name this frame 10. I'm going to take the first frame and I'm going to drag it up to the top. So we'll have the ball start at the top, and we're going to pretend like we're dropping it and it's hitting the ground. So 10 will be, it's going to be back up here. So it's going to be back up here when it loops. So I'm going to put this here. So let's say it's going to hit the ground at 5. So I'll actually make this 5. That was a little confusing, sorry. So I'm going to have this hit the ground, and when it hits the ground, say it's right there. We want it to like squash. So there's this really cool website. These guys at Disney came up with these 12 principles of animation a long time ago, and they've been like translated into a bunch of different videos and different things. But there's a really cool there's actually a really cool Tumblr. It's the 12principles.tumblr.com, and so this has visual examples of all these different principles that they came up with. And so this is stuff that was done in cartoons before then, but they kind of just made it into like this guide that you can go by. And you can see like in a lot of old cartoons they had stuff like this, and also in current stuff. And it just makes things look really good. So squash and stretch is the one that we're going to do. So basically, when something hits the ground, it's stretching out. When something is in motion, it's stretching itself out. And so we're going to do that same thing with the ball, make it look good. And a couple of things to note is some mistakes that people make with this. So we've got this ball here, and you could just transform it, and you could just say, okay, well, I'm going to squash it, right? And if you squash it like that, it's almost like the ball doesn't have the same amount of mass that it had before. So what you need to do is actually take the sides out, and then it's like that mass is actually going somewhere. So if you were squishing a ball down, the sides would like extrude out, and it would actually look something more like that. And that looks terrible, right? So I'm going to focus on getting the motion looking right, and then I'm going to go back and draw over each of the sprites and make it look nice and clean. So we're going to start out, so that's frame 5. There's a cool thing in Photoshop that lets you have a timeline. So if you don't already have that open in Photoshop, you can go to Window Timeline, but I've already got it down here. So by default, it has this button here called Create Video Timeline. I like to use this frame by frame animation, which is this little button down here. And then you create Okay, and now we have a sprite sheet. This is like exactly. This is exactly what. Okay, so this is like exactly what the sprite sheet should look like if we're going to do this animation, just with a sprite sheet without doing any kind of like moving the ball around in Unity. So I'm going to save this. So I'm going to export this, save for web. Save. Okay. Alright, so now we can go back into Unity. I'm going to take this animation of the ball animation, I'm going to drag it into here. Okay, so now we've got a brand new sprite, right? So we bring it into the game. I'm going to get rid of the old one. So now this, right? So we've got one picture that has 10 balls on it. And so what we need to do is we need to fix that so that we divide these sprites up into individual pictures. And so before we had to do open up the inspector, which is basically just clicking on these pictures opens up the inspector for them. And if you go to filter mode, we want to change that to point, and that'll make them keep them from being blurry. And then the next thing is sprite mode, single. You want to change that to multiple. And then you hit apply, and then you open the sprite editor. And the sprite editor is this window here. And so what this is going to do up here, there's this menu slice. You want to change it. You want to change it from, for our case, normally if you were doing some things that you wanted it to like crop them out for you, you could do automatic. But for ours, we're going to do cell count, and we're going to do columns and rows. So columns and rows is just like Excel spreadsheets or whatever. Columns, we're going to have 10 columns, and we only have one row because this is just a film strip, right? So we're going to hit slice, and now we've got these 10 different frames that are all cut out. Make sure you hit apply right here. So hit apply, and then you can close this window. So now the ball animation, you see it still says ball animation. This is still using the sprite. See how it's tall, even though there's just the ball, there's one ball there? That's because the ball animation has been split out into all these different frames. And so the easiest way that I found to make an animation with a sprite sheet in Unity is just to select all of these frames and just drag that into your scene. That's going to open up this thing here where it says like, oh, you've got a bunch of pictures and you just dragged them into the scene. You probably want to make an animation out of it. So then it's going to make a new file that defines that animation. So I'm going to say ball animation. And normally I would make a separate folder. I'm just going to do it. So I'm going to make a separate folder called animations. So sprites are the pictures that are in the animations, and animations is just the animation themselves. So save. So now I can delete the old one that was just a single frame, and I'm going to go ahead and chop this 0 off of the number. And now when I hit play in the game, you can see that the ball animation, it just auto plays. So that's it. That's basically how to get sprite animations into your game. And if I zoom in here, you can see it a little bit better. But
did you change the speed inside Unity?
yeah, let's see here.
Yeah, so way to make it faster.
Yeah. So over here, and the really cool thing about Unity is the game is still running, and I can edit things live. They don't save if you edit them live though, so you have to remember what you changed and then go back when you're not playing the game and change them again. But so I'm going to pause, or not pause, actually stop, so that I have that. If under this, so I've got this game object here called ball animation. Each of these things in the inspector over here, each of these is called a component, and so these are different components. So sprite render is a component, and animator is a component. So this animator component is created because we made an animation, and so inside of the animator component. For example, each of these components, they let you turn them on and off. So if we like played the game and we've got sprite renderer turned on, and that's rendering the sprite, but if we turned off animator, it doesn't animate anymore. So that's an example of how the components work. So under controller, we double click on this. There's speed right here. So speed right now is 1. Let's change it to 10.
So is that like 10 frames per
Yeah. So what's the? Do you know how the speed works? Because it's like we have it set to 1, and and we have 10 frames.
So the little, so you see that thing that says motion? The thing in there, if you double click that, it'll actually bring up the, I think you can hit open at the top right. Okay, go to window and then animation. It's under, yeah, then animation. So that brings up the timeline that you can edit. There it is. And then it's set to 32 samples, which is 30, or is it 12?
12.
It's 12, so it's 12 frames per second.
Okay.
So if it takes a second for your animation, times it by 10, and now it takes a tenth of a second on that animation.
So I could do
12, if it's 12 frames.
Yeah.
Sorry, then it's,
So I could do 10.
yeah, 10.
So then it's like each frame is taking 1 second, or no, it's each frame is taking 1/10 of a second. Yeah.
So you'd probably have to change the speed again in Acme.
So
it's
the-
2 separate systems.
So this animation, if I change that speed to 10, then the way that I can like understand that easily is if I have this. How do I get back to that? Double click on this. So ball animation, we got now 10. So what it's doing is each animation is taking 1 second to complete, and then I'm multiplying the speed by 10. So if I make it 2, that'll be like, it'll be double.
Animate twice in a second.
Yeah. So now it's 0.5 seconds for it to complete, and then it,
And the thing with the timeline is you can adjust each keyframe's timing individually.
yeah. So that's really cool. So I'm gonna make this bigger. So I'm just adjusting the scale. So I'm gonna make this 5, and then make sure to do the Y too, because you gotta change both the X and the Y. So, and then I will make it. Yep. So that's how that works. So you can get your animations into Unity pretty easily. The other thing is that Spritesheets are often made by a tool, like an external tool. There's a tool that I've used before that's I'm spacing on the name. That's great.
There's one built
Texture packer. There
There's
you go.
one built in Unity as well.
Yeah. So I guess you wouldn't really need to use it. But the other way to do this would be to actually do the motion inside of Unity, and then that way you could actually slice this spreadsheet where you don't have to have all this empty space everywhere. So I'll show you that real quick, and then we can and then I think we'll just do like some free time for drawing and hanging out. So I'm just going to take all of these and I'll just line them all up. I can actually get them as close together as I want because Unity will let me slice them up. So I'm just going to do that. Slice them out. I don't want to get these too cramped. You know what, I don't even have to do that because I can just show you the other way to slice them up. So I'm just going to make a copy of this. So another way to slice them up instead of having it be like an even grid is to use automatic. And then if you hit slice, see it crops in on each of those sprites. And then each of those sprites has a pivot point. And so you can see, I have to make it a lot bigger. So for example, this sprite has a pivot point at the center. So what it's going to do is if you made an animation of these, it's not going to have that motion of falling and going back up. It's just going to have, they're all going to be like overlapping in the same spot. So I'm going to hit apply, and it'll make a new animation. So I'm going to grab all these again, drag it onto the scene, and it's going to say new animation. So I'll say ball 2, and then if I'm also going to make this like 5 times bigger. Okay, so now if I play, you can see that one is just animating in place. And so with that, then you would have to do something like writing a script in Unity that would make it raise and lower. And you would probably want to do that in a game where, because you wouldn't want the sprite to actually be that big rectangle like we had for the first one. You'd probably want it to only be the tiny square that is actually around the ball. So like if you were doing something like checking to see if that ball is touching something else in the game, to see if like, you know, it's hitting the floor or something like that, then you could basically trigger the animation like the ball is normal, it's the round ball, but then if it hits the ground, then it would squish, and it squish down. And then if it just hit the ground, then you would tell it to go back up, and you would tell it to maybe stretch out or something, to depending on how you want it to look. So there's basically like two ways of doing something like this. So, but yeah, there's a whole another animation system or a way of doing animations in Unity for sprites that I could show you. That's in my game. Let's save this. Okay, so in my game, the animations are all handled by rotating the sprites instead of actually having sprites that change with Spritesheets. So an example of that is the actual robot. So I'm going to open up animations. Find player jump. So yeah, I've got some weird stuff. I have to create something real quick. Okay, so this is an example of the jump. This is the sliding animation, and then we also have a jump animation and a fall animation. I don't think that. I think the arms are supposed to move on that one too. Maybe they don't. Okay, so the way that these animations work is I'm going to create a new one. You've got all these pieces. For our game, we've got the way that the robots work is that each one of them has a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a body, and those are the separate pieces. So each one of those is a separate sprite. So like the head is a separate sprite, the arms are separate sprites, and the body is a separate sprite. Everything is parented to the body, so it's like the body is like the core of the robot, and all the things are just kind of hanging off of it by these points. So, for example, the head is attached to the neck. So the way that our animations work is instead of animating the arm, we basically animate the neck and the shoulders or the hips. And so if I want to do an animation, I would select these, the things that I want to move, and then I would see. It's been a little bit since I've done this, so. It's not a bit. I don't know why the keyframe thing isn't lighting up. Do you have any idea on what the keyframe thing?
I think you either have to hit the record button or add the property.
Oh, okay. So.
And once you make the change, it will add.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm gonna go over to here, and then I'm just gonna make the head rotate back, and then I'm gonna move it back a little bit, and then if I play this, it just
really fast.
Yeah, it's really fast. And then it also immediately jerks back to the first one. So this timeline, it's like going from this position to this position, and then it's automatically just jerking back. So for the head, I would need to copy this stuff, and I can like paste it over here. And then kind of waggle back and forth like that. So this is like a completely different style of animation. Like you're not drawing every single frame, you're animating it by moving and rotating things, or so you have different options. You can rotate, you can move something with the X and Y. You can also scale. So if I want to make the so let me delete these. So if I want to make it wide on that frame, and then I want to play that, so it's gonna stretch out. Actually, I did it on the wrong frame, so it should be on this one. So yeah, so that you can make some pretty cool stuff with it. So like with the falling animation, I don't have the arms moving, so I think I want to add that. So I'll just say, like, I'll just grab the record of the arm. The other thing is the all of the this one totally isn't respecting the thing I'm trying to talk about. The pivot points. So like all of our animations are based off of pivot points, and the way that you can change the pivot points is if you open up the sprite. So I have example. I'm just going to open up a random sprite because I don't remember which one is this. So say that on this blueprint I want to have a pivot point. So I'll open this up. You go into a sprite editor, and then there's this this little circle, and you can drag that around somewhere. So if I drag it to this corner, and then I hit apply, and then I have this in the game, it's not doing it. Am I supposed to rotate around the point that you tell it?
Yeah, you're on center mode, top left.
Top left what?
Yeah, very top left of the screen. Over to the right a little bit. It's the center. So
I've never seen that before. Well, anyway, so I set the pivot point to that corner, so now it's going to rotate around that corner. So that's how like the neck and the other stuff, the head will rotate around that neck, or the leg will rotate around the point where it's connected. So that's how you can create kind of like, they're almost exactly like puppets. So it's like you've got a puppet, you can move it around. You could also have multiple segments. So like if you wanted to have, I mean, you can make as much as you want, but you could have like a thigh connected to a knee, connected to a leg, lower leg, and then a foot, and you can have all of those move independently, and they all rotate around their pivot point. So, but yeah, I think I went over everything I wanted to go over. Okay.
Anyone have questions?
Thanks. So I've got we're doing a beta for our game right now. If anybody has looking for more people with like iPhone or Android devices to try out the game, and the beta is going to start probably like next week. So I can sign people up if they want to try it out. I just need an email address, or you can go to our website. So 2scoopgames.com. There's this. If you go to Kickbot.dx right here, and you click on this button, join the beta. There's just a form. It basically just asks you about, what kind of phone you have, or phone or tablet, and then you can try a beta version of this game that we're making, and we could really use the help getting feedback on any kind of bugs or anything that you found hard to use, or anything that was didn't make any sense. It would be really helpful to us. So just let me know if you want to sign up, or if you want to share this with anybody that you think might be interested in playing the game. It's 2scoopgames.com. Thanks.
Thank you.